The rain fell steadily on that gloomy Tuesday afternoon as I stood alone by the fresh grave, my black umbrella doing little to shield me from the biting autumn wind. Everyone else had already left, but I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Not yet. The polished granite headstone seemed to mock me with its pristine newness, my husband's name carved in perfect letters, the dates below marking a life cut tragically short at just 45 years old. Mike had been the picture of health just 2 weeks ago. A respected psychiatrist with his own private practice, he'd always taken care of himself, going for morning runs and eating those awful healthy smoothies he loved so much. The car accident had come out of nowhere, they said. A patch of black ice, a split-second loss of control, and just like that, my world had shattered. I kept replaying our last morning together in my head. He'd kissed me goodbye as always, his breath smelling of coffee and mint. "Don't wait up," he'd said, mentioning a late patient appointment. "I'll probably be in my study when I get home." That study, his private sanctuary in our house, always locked for patient confidentiality, he'd explained. In 15 years of marriage, I'd only been inside a handful of times. The funeral had been exactly as he would have wanted it, dignified, understated, with classical music playing softly in the background. His colleagues from the medical center had all come, along with what seemed like half the town. Mike had always been well-liked, known for his gentle manner and the way he really listened when people spoke. I wiped my eyes, smudging my mascara for the 100th time that day. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the umbrella in an endless rhythm. That's when I heard footsteps behind me in the wet grass. Mrs. Chen. The voice was familiar. Dr. Peterson, one of Mike's oldest colleagues. I turned to find him standing there, his silver hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. He wasn't carrying an umbrella. "I've been waiting to speak with you privately." Something in his tone made me pause. I'd known Dr. Peterson for years. He and Mike had shared patients, consulted on tough cases together. But I'd never seen him look so uncomfortable. "There are some things about Mike you should know," he said, glancing around as if checking we were truly alone. "Things I've recently discovered that." He stopped abruptly, reaching into his coat pocket. His hands were shaking slightly as he pulled out a small envelope. "I can't say more here, but read this when you're alone." And he hesitated. "Be careful when you start going through his things, especially in that study of his." Before I could respond, he pressed the envelope into my hand and walked away, leaving me standing there in the rain, staring at the unmarked white envelope. My fingers trembled as I slipped it into my purse, mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. The drive home was a blur. Our house, my house now, I supposed, looked different somehow. Emptier, despite nothing having changed. The same familiar porch light welcomed me, the same creaky third step needed fixing. But as I unlocked the front door, Dr. Peterson's words echoed in my head. What had he meant about being careful? What could possibly be in Mike's study that would warrant such a warning? I hung my wet coat in the hallway, my eyes drawn to the study door at the end of the corridor. It had always been there, always locked, a normal part of our daily life that I'd never questioned. But now, in the gathering darkness of the evening, it seemed to hold something ominous. A secret waiting to be discovered. The envelope in my purse felt heavy, like it was pulling me down. I needed a drink first, maybe several drinks. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever Dr. Peterson had been so worried about, it could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, I just needed to be alone with my grief, with my memories of the man I thought I knew so well. But as I walked to the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The life I'd known, the marriage I'd thought was perfect, it was all balanced on a nice edge. And somehow, I knew that once I opened that envelope, there would be no going back. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I'd loved for 15 years. 3 weeks passed before I could bring myself to touch the envelope Dr. Peterson had given me. It sat on my bedside table, a constant reminder of unspoken secrets, while I moved through my days like a ghost in my own home. The study door remained closed, just as Mike had always kept it. Every morning, I'd walk past that door, coffee in hand, and pause. Sometimes I'd rest my palm against the dark wood, remembering how Mike would disappear inside for hours, claiming to work on patient files. "It's all confidential," he'd say with that gentle smile of his. You understand, don't you, honey? And I had understood, or thought I did. But last night, something changed. Maybe it was the wine I'd had with dinner, or maybe it was the weight of loneliness pressing down on me. I found myself pulling open his desk drawer in our bedroom, searching for that spare key he'd mentioned years ago. Just in case, he'd said, though in case of what, he never specified. The key was there, tucked inside an old envelope marked tax documents. My hands trembled as I held it, this small piece of metal that suddenly felt so important. I didn't sleep that night, watching the hours tick by on our bedroom clock, Dr. Peterson's warning echoing in my mind. Morning came with a burst of unexpected courage. I got dressed, made my coffee, and walked straight to that study door. The key slid into the lock smoothly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. One turn, a soft click, and the door swung open. The smell hit me first, Mike's cologne mixed with old paper and something else, something chemical I couldn't quite place. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it that last morning. His coffee mug still sat on the desk, a faint ring stained into the wood beneath it. Papers were stacked neatly in trays, post-it notes lined up along the computer monitor. It all seemed so normal, so perfectly ordinary. But then I noticed things that didn't quite fit. The filing cabinets, there were 6 of them, all locked. Mike's practice had never been that large. He'd always kept his client list small and selective. Why would he need so many files? And the security system panel by the door, I'd never known it existed, hidden behind a painting of the ocean. It looked expensive, far more sophisticated than our home security system. My eyes caught something else, a small red light blinking steadily in the corner of the ceiling. A camera. My heart started racing. Why would Mike need a security camera in his home office? What was he protecting or monitoring? I sat in his leather chair, trying to calm my nerves. The desk drawers were locked, but I found a ring of keys in his coffee mug. My fingers shook as I tried each one, until finally, a small silver key worked. The drawer slid open with a soft whoosh. Inside, I found 3 phones, not just his regular iPhone that I knew about, but 2 other basic models, the kind you could buy with cash and throw away. Burner phones, they called them on TV shows. My stomach churned as I turned them over in my hands. One had a cracked screen but still powered on. The messages were all deleted. Underneath the phones lay a notebook, its black cover worn at the corners. I opened it, expecting to find patient notes. Instead, I saw pages of numbers and letters arranged in patterns that made no sense. Some kind of code. The handwriting was definitely Mike's, but this wasn't his normal neat script. These notes looked hurried, almost frantic in places. That's when I noticed the false panel in the bottom of the drawer. It was so well crafted I might have missed it, but the edge caught the morning light just so. My heart pounding, I pried it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a laptop I'd never seen before, thinner and more expensive looking than the one Mike used for work. I pulled it out, set it on the desk, and opened it. The screen came to life, demanding a password. Of course. I tried our anniversary date. Nothing. His birthday. Nothing. My birthday, his mother's birthday, our first date. Nothing worked. But then I remembered something. That morning, his last morning, when he kissed me goodbye. He'd been humming a tune, Bach's Toccata in D minor. It had seemed odd at the time, as he usually hated classical music. With shaking fingers, I typed in Toccata. The screen unlocked. Folders appeared, dozens of them, all with names I didn't recognize. Just as I clicked on the first one, a loud beep made me jump. The security panel by the door had come to life, its screen glowing red. Warning messages scrolled past faster than I could read them. Something had been activated, but what and why? I quickly closed the laptop, my mind racing. The phones, the coded notebook, the hidden computer, the security system I'd never known about, none of it made sense. The man I'd been married to for 15 years suddenly felt like a stranger. Dr. Peterson's envelope still sat unopened in my pocket, growing heavier by the minute. Whatever secrets Mike had been keeping, they were bigger than just a few confidential patient files. And something told me I was only scratching the surface. The security panel's beeping finally stopped, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. I sat in Mike's leather chair, staring at the laptop screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The folder names were all dates, stretching back 5 years. Inside each one were more folders, labeled with what looked like initials. I clicked on the most recent folder. My hands froze on the keyboard as images filled the screen, hundreds of them. They showed people going about their daily lives, shopping at grocery stores, walking their dogs, sitting in coffee shops. Some faces I recognized as Mike's patients, but others were complete strangers. Each photo had detailed notes attached, times, locations, and bizarre comments about behavioral patterns and response cycles. The sound of a car door slamming outside made me jump. I quickly closed the laptop, shoving it back into its hiding place. Through the study window, I watched our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, getting her mail. Just an ordinary moment on an ordinary day, except nothing felt ordinary anymore. I turned back to the desk, determined to understand what my husband had been doing. The coded notebook still lay open, its pages filled with Mike's hurried writing. Looking closer now, I noticed patterns in the numbers. They corresponded to dates, times, locations. Was he tracking people? But why? The filing cabinets beckoned. Using the ring of keys I'd found, I tried each one until the first cabinet clicked open. Inside, hanging files stretched back in neat rows, each labeled with the same initials I'd seen on the laptop. But these weren't typical patient files. I pulled out one folder and began reading. My coffee grew cold beside me as I turned page after page of detailed observations. This wasn't therapeutic note-taking, it was surveillance. Mike had been watching his patients outside of their sessions, documenting their every move, their routines, their relationships. One note caught my eye. Subject shows increased anxiety when passing the coffee shop where previous incident occurred. Confirmation of artificially induced behavioral modification. What did that mean? What had Mike done? The next cabinet contained financial records. Bank statements showed regular large deposits from an account I'd never seen before. The amounts were staggering, far more than Mike could have made from his practice. Mixed in with the statements were receipts for sophisticated surveillance equipment and something called behavioral modification supplies. My phone buzzed, making me gasp. A text from my friend Linda. Just checking in. Haven't heard from you in days, lunch soon. I stared at the message, feeling suddenly disconnected from my normal life. How could I sit through lunch, make small talk, when everything I thought I knew was crumbling around me? I turned back to my discovery, pulling out more files. Each one revealed a new layer of deception. Mike hadn't just been treating his patients, he'd been studying them like lab rats, documenting their reactions to situations that, I was beginning to suspect, he had orchestrated himself. In one file, I found a series of letters between Mike and someone who signed only as R. They discussed project progress and successful interventions. The last letter mentioned a network expansion and warned about keeping security protocols tight. The implications were becoming clear, and they were horrifying. My husband, the man I thought I knew, had been running some kind of psychological experiment on unsuspecting people. But he couldn't have done this alone. The security system, the encrypted files, the mysterious deposits, it all pointed to something bigger. I reached for my purse, finally ready to read Dr. Peterson's letter. But as I opened my bag, something clattered to the floor. A small flash drive had fallen out, one I'd never seen before. It must have been tucked into the envelope without me noticing. Just then, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. The message sent chills down my spine. Still in the study? You should be more careful about triggering security systems. Mike had protocols in place for a reason. I looked up at the camera in the corner, its red light still blinking steadily. Someone was watching. Right now. Someone knew I was here. My fingers clutched the flash drive as I quickly gathered my things. Questions raced through my mind. Who had texted me? How many others were involved in whatever Mike had been doing? And most importantly, was I in danger? I locked the study door behind me, but I knew it was just the beginning. I'd opened a door that couldn't be closed again. Whatever dark truth lay behind my husband's secret life, I was now part of it. And somehow, I knew that the next file I opened, the next secret I uncovered, would change everything. The flash drive felt heavy in my pocket as I walked to my car. Whatever was on it, I'd need a secure place to view it. Because one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear, I wasn't just grieving a husband anymore. I was uncovering a conspiracy. and someone out there wanted to make sure these secrets stayed buried. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a small motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash for a room, and pulled out my old laptop, the one Mike had never touched. My hands trembled as I inserted the flash drive. Whatever was on it, I needed to know. But the drive was empty, or at least it appeared to be at first glance. Then I remembered something Mike had once mentioned about hidden files. After a few minutes of searching online, I found instructions for revealing hidden content. There it was, a single folder named Insurance. The files inside made my blood run cold. Hundreds of photos, all taken through windows from cars in public places. Some were of Mike's patients, as I'd expected, but others, I recognized our neighbors, friends, even myself. Photos of me shopping, getting coffee, working in our garden, all taken without my knowledge over the past 3 years. Each photo had a date and detailed notes attached. The ones of me were the most disturbing. Subject maintains normal routine despite introduced stresses. Subject shows no awareness of manufactured social conflicts. Controlled isolation program proceeding as planned. Manufactured conflicts. Controlled isolation. I thought back over the past few years. How many of my friendships had mysteriously fallen apart? How many job opportunities had unexpectedly evaporated? Had Mike been orchestrating my entire life? A sound outside my motel room made me jump. Just someone walking past, but my nerves were shot. I continued scrolling through the files, finding more photos, more notes. Then I opened a video file. It showed a therapy session in Mike's office. I recognized the patient, a quiet woman who lived down the street. She was crying, talking about her growing anxiety, her feelings of being watched. Mike's voice was calm, soothing. These paranoid thoughts are completely normal given your condition. Let's increase your medication. But there was nothing normal about it. According to the notes attached to the video, Mike had been having someone follow her, move things in her house when she was out, call her phone and hang up. He was deliberately causing her paranoia, then medicating her for it. I felt sick. How many others had he done this to? And why? The next file gave me a clue. A spreadsheet showing payments from something called the Behavioral Modification Research Initiative. The amounts were huge, far more than any ethical research grant I'd ever heard of. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. The flash drive was meant for Dr. Peterson. You're looking at things you shouldn't see. My heart nearly stopped. How did they know what I was doing? I yanked the flash drive out of the laptop and was about to leave when I noticed something odd about the room's air vent. It was slightly crooked, and there was a glint of metal inside. Using a pen, I carefully pried it open. Another flash drive fell out, older and dustier than the first. Had someone hidden it here? Or had Mike? I remembered him mentioning this motel once, saying he sometimes recommended it to out-of-town patients. How many secrets had he scattered around this town? This drive was different. No hidden files, just a single document titled Project Overview. As I read, the full scope of what Mike had been involved in began to emerge. This wasn't just about observing people, it was about controlling them. Creating artificial life situations, manipulating relationships, manufacturing conflicts, and then studying how people reacted. All under the guise of therapy. But the document mentioned others. A network of researchers, doctors, and observers spread across multiple cities. Mike had been just one part of a massive psychological experiment, using real people as unwitting test subjects. The final page was a list of names. People I knew, people I'd met at parties, people who'd been our friends. Next to each name was a category: control group, test subject, or observer. My name was on the list. Category: primary test subject. Suddenly, my laptop screen went black. Then words appeared, as if someone was typing, "You've accessed restricted files. Ending remote session." My laptop switched off completely. I sat in the darkness of the motel room, my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my friendships, even my own struggles and successes, had been carefully orchestrated. I wasn't just a widow discovering her husband's secrets anymore. I was a test subject who'd become aware of the experiment. A car pulled into the motel parking lot, its headlights sweeping across my window. Then another. And another. I peered through the curtains and saw men in dark suits stepping out, their movements purposeful. I grabbed my bag, the flash drives, and my dead laptop. There had to be another way out of this room. Because one thing was clear, the experiment wasn't over. And now that I knew about it, I had become something far more dangerous than a test subject. I had become a liability. The motel bathroom window was small, but I managed to squeeze through it. As I dropped into the alley behind the building, I heard voices in my room. They'd found it empty. I clutched my bag closer and ran into the night, my mind spinning with everything I'd discovered. I needed somewhere safe to think, to process what I'd learned. The park where Mike and I used to have Sunday picnics was nearby. At 2 a.m., it would be deserted. I found a bench hidden by trees and pulled out Dr. Peterson's envelope with trembling hands. It was time to read his letter. "I'm sorry," it began. "I discovered what Mike was doing 3 months ago. The experiments, the manipulation, it goes deeper than you can imagine. There's a safe in his office wall, behind the painting of mountains. The combination is the date you first met, but backward. What you'll find inside. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. Be careful who you trust. Even I don't know everyone who's involved. The safe, of course. I'd seen that painting every time I passed Mike's study, never questioning why a man who hated mountain scenes would hang one so prominently. But I couldn't go home now, not with those men looking for me. I needed help. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That my dead husband had been part of a psychological experiment conspiracy. That I'd found secret files and hidden flash drives. I'd sound crazy, which, I realized with a chill, was probably exactly what they wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Are you okay? 2 men in suits came by asking about you. They said they're from Mike's insurance company, but something felt off." Then another message. I didn't tell them anything. "Come to my house. Back door will be unlocked." Linda. We'd been friends since college, before I even met Mike. If I couldn't trust her, I couldn't trust anyone. I made my way through back streets and alleyways, jumping at every shadow. The flash drives felt like they were burning a hole in my pocket. Linda's house was dark when I arrived, but as promised, the back door was open. "Linda?" I whispered, stepping into her kitchen. No answer. My heart started pounding. Something wasn't right. I found her in the living room, sitting stiffly in her armchair. 2 men in suits stood nearby, the same men from the motel. "I'm sorry," Linda said, not meeting my eyes. "They said they'd hurt my kids." "Please, sit down," one of the men said. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "We just want to talk about what you found in your husband's study." "And the flash drives," the other added. "We need those back. They contain sensitive research data." "Research?" My voice shook. "You mean evidence. Evidence of what you did to all those people. What you did to me." The first man sighed. "Your husband was developing new therapeutic techniques, ways to help people overcome trauma by controlling their environment. Everything was carefully monitored, ethically approved." "Ethically approved?" I laughed bitterly. "You manipulated people's lives, their relationships, their mental health. You made them think they were crazy." "We helped them overcome their limitations," he corrected. "By creating controlled challenges, we helped people build resilience. Your own career success was part of the program. Those job setbacks you overcame, they made you stronger." My mind raced back over the past few years. The gallery that mysteriously backed out of showing my artwork. The teaching position that vanished at the last minute. The friendships that inexplicably fell apart. All orchestrated, all experiments. "Why me?" I whispered. "Mike chose you because he saw your potential. He knew that with the right guidance, you could become exceptional. And he was right. Look at how you've handled this situation. The investigative skills you've shown. The resilience. He's offering you a choice," Linda suddenly spoke up. "The same choice they gave me when I found out." The man nodded. "You can join us. Help us refine the program. Your insights would be invaluable." Or, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The threat was clear. That's when I noticed something. A tiny red light blinking in Linda's bookshelf. The same kind of camera I'd seen in Mike's study. And just like that, I understood. This whole scene was another experiment. They were watching my reaction, documenting my response to this revelation. I looked at Linda, really looked at her. The stiff posture, the nervous glances at the bookshelf. She wasn't just warning me with her eyes. She was telling me something. My fingers found the flash drives in my pocket. Everything they'd done, everyone they'd hurt. The evidence was right here. And now they were offering me a chance to become one of them. To turn from test subject to experimenter. But there was one thing they hadn't counted on. One variable they couldn't control. They'd made me too good at spotting their manipulations. I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes on the two men. "I need time to think about your offer," I said carefully. The first man nodded, looking pleased. Of course he did. This was exactly how they wanted me to react. Predictable. Controllable. "Take 24 hours, he said, handing me a business card. "Call this number when you're ready to discuss your future with the initiative." The card was blank except for a phone number. No name, no company logo, nothing traceable. As they left through the front door, I waited, counting silently to 30. Linda remained frozen in her chair, but her eyes kept darting to her kitchen. I followed her gaze and noticed her phone on the counter, its screen facing up. A note app was open with a single line of text. "They're still watching. Bathroom. 10 minutes." I made a show of pacing, running my hands through my hair like I was deep in thought. Inside, my heart was racing. After what felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life, I asked to use the bathroom. The moment I closed the door, Linda turned on the faucet and shower. Over the noise, she whispered, "There's a whole network of us. People who found out, who they tried to recruit. We've been gathering evidence for months." "You're not really working with them," I whispered back. Playing along was the only way to help others. Listen carefully. Mike was getting suspicious of the program. That's why. She paused. "We don't think his car accident was an accident." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the sink to steady myself. "The files in his safe," I managed to say. "Dr. Peterson's letter mentioned." "We need those files," Linda cut in. Mike was documenting everything. Names, locations, proof of what they've been doing. But we have to be careful. They've got people everywhere. Doctors, teachers, even local police. "The camera in your bookshelf. They installed it last week, said it was for my protection. They're watching my house, my phone, everything. But they're not as smart as they think they are." She pulled something from behind the bathroom cabinet, a small notebook. "Mike gave me this the day before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should wait for you to figure things out on your own." My hands shook as I took the notebook. Inside were more codes, but these looked different from the ones in his study. "The back page," Linda whispered. "It's a key to his code system and coordinates. Places where he hid copies of everything." The shower water was starting to run cold. We didn't have much time. "Tonight at midnight," Linda continued, "go to the coffee shop on Pine Street. Order a large coffee with extra cream. The barista will give you a laptop. It's clean, they can't track it. Use it to upload everything you find. But the men watching your house, don't worry about them. We've got that covered. Just be careful going home. And whatever you do, don't call that number they gave you. The phone lines are all monitored." I slipped the notebook into my pocket next to the flash drives. "Linda, why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Mike made me promise to let you discover it yourself. Said it was the only way you'd be ready for what comes next. He loved you, you know. Everything he did, all the notes he kept, he was building a case to bring them down. To free everyone from the experiment." The pipes creaked as Linda turned off the water. Before opening the door, she grabbed my arm. "One more thing. The safe in his study. There's more than just files in there. Mike left you a message. A real one, not the experiments and observations they forced him to write. But be careful when you get it. They'll be watching the house." I nodded, my mind already racing with plans. As I walked back to the living room, I made sure to look troubled, conflicted, exactly how they'd expect me to look. Through the window, I could see a black car parked across the street. They were watching, analyzing my every move. Let them watch. Because while they'd been so busy studying how people react to manipulation, they'd missed something crucial. They'd missed how people react when they discover the truth, when they realize they're not alone. Mike had known this. He'd spent years pretending to be their loyal researcher while secretly gathering evidence against them, building a resistance. And now, without even meaning to, they'd trained me to be exactly what he needed, someone who could see through their manipulations, someone who could finish what he started. I hugged Linda goodbye, playing my part perfectly. Let them think I was wrestling with their offer. Let them think they still had control. Tonight, I would go home and open that safe. I would find Mike's real message. And then, with the help of others like Linda, other test subjects who'd woken up to the truth, we would expose everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their greatest experiment, their proudest success story, was about to become their biggest nightmare. I just had to survive until midnight. The coffee shop was quiet at midnight. Just as Linda had said, the barista didn't bat an eye when I ordered a large coffee with extra cream. She handed me a laptop bag along with my drink, whispering, "The password is Freedom 242. Good luck." I drove around for an hour after that, making sure no one was following me, before finally heading home. The house was dark, exactly as I'd left it, but now I knew better than to trust appearances. They'd be watching, waiting to see what I would do. I made a show of getting ready for bed, leaving lights on in my bedroom while I quietly made my way to Mike's study. The mountain painting seemed to watch me as I carefully took it down. There it was, a small safe built into the wall, just as Dr. Peterson had described. My hands trembled as I entered the combination, the date we met, backward. The safe door swung open with a soft click. Inside was a single USB drive and an envelope with my name on it, written in Mike's familiar handwriting. I took both, then reached deeper into the safe. My fingers found something else, a small voice recorder. Brand new. This hadn't been mentioned in Peterson's letter. Back in my bedroom, I opened Mike's letter first. "My love, if you're reading this, then I'm probably dead. They discovered I was gathering evidence against them. But they don't know about the backup files, about the network of survivors I've been building. You're not alone in this fight. The voice recorder is new. I bought it yesterday. There's something on it you need to hear, my confession, my real story, not the lies they made me write in those files. But more importantly, it contains names. Names of people at the top of the initiative. People who've been running these experiments for years. I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I knew they were watching. Everything I did, the surveillance, the notes, even the cruel experiments, was to gain their trust while I gathered evidence. But I never manipulated you. Your struggles, your successes, those were all you. Your strength is real. There's one more thing you should know. Dr. Chen from the hospital board, she's one of us. Show her the USB drive. She has connections to the media, people who can't be bought or threatened. Together, you can expose everything. I love you. I always have. And I'm sorry I won't be there to see you bring them down. Mike." Tears blurred my vision as I picked up the voice recorder. Mike's voice filled my ears, quiet but determined. "This is my final testimony about the Behavioral Modification Research Initiative." For the next hour, I listened as my husband revealed everything. Names of high-ranking officials, locations of secret research facilities, bank accounts used to fund their experiments. He documented it all. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The offer expires in 3 hours. Choose wisely." I smiled, thinking of all the cameras probably watching me right now. They thought they were seeing someone broken by grief, confused by revelations, tempted by their offer of power. They were wrong. I copied everything from the USB drive onto the clean laptop. Added Mike's audio confession. Linda had shown me the secure upload site, untraceable, protected by people who'd escaped the initiative's control. With trembling fingers, I pressed send. Minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications. The files were being downloaded worldwide. News organizations were picking up the story. The initiative's careful house of cards was about to collapse. Another text came through, "You've made a serious mistake." But I wasn't afraid anymore, because at that exact moment, red and blue lights started flashing outside my window. Not local police. I could see the FBI jackets as agents swarmed the street. Dr. Chen had come through. I watched as the men who'd been watching my house were led away in handcuffs. watched as more agents headed to other houses in the neighborhood, arresting the initiative's observers one by one. My phone buzzed one last time. "Linda, turn on the news." Every channel was covering it. Breaking news, massive psychology experiment conspiracy uncovered. Hundreds of lives manipulated in secret research program. Top officials implicated in illegal behavior modification scheme. I sat in Mike's study as the sun rose, his letter clutched in my hand. The cameras that had watched me for so long were dark now. The files that had documented years of manipulation would now serve as evidence in court. And somewhere out there, hundreds of people were waking up to discover that their struggles, their paranoia, their fears had been real all along. They would need support, guidance, help putting their lives back together. I thought of Mike's words, "Your strength is real." He was right. Everything they'd put me through had made me stronger, but not in the way they'd intended. They'd tried to create a perfect test subject. Instead, they'd created their perfect nightmare, someone who could see through their manipulations, gather evidence, and bring their whole system crashing down. The morning light filtered through the study window, casting long shadows across the floor. It was over. The experiments, the surveillance, the fear, all of it was finally over. I opened my laptop and began to write. Someone needed to tell this story, not just my story, but everyone's story. All the lives they tried to control, all the people who'd fought back. Because in the end, that's what they'd never understood. You can't control human nature. You can't predict how people will react when they discover the truth, and you can't stop them from fighting back. Mike had known that. He'd died fighting for that truth. And I was going to make sure everyone knew it.